city authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from the graves and attacking the living. And the bodies rising from the dead are that of Anthrax in worship music. Welcome everyone to Thunderdome Metal Reviews. I am Tracy Newport, and with me as always is the Dr. David Pizzo and the Reverend Ben Lindsay. How y'all doing today, gentlemen?
No. That's all I can think of when you say that. That riff that comes right after that. I'm great. I'm ready to talk about some fucking Anthrax, and I'm glad my brothers are here to do it with me.
And returning guest with us tonight is Mr. Gabe Cooper. How you doing today, sir?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Yeah, we're talking about Anthrax, the 2010 album.
11? Listen to this amateur hour.
2011.
It is the 2011 album. Released on September 12th, 2011. Their 10th studio album, released on Megaforce through Nuclear Blast. Produced by Rob Caggiano and Jay Rustin, has a runtime of 65 minutes and 43 seconds. The band at the time of release, well, that is quite the story. Credited for this album are Joey Belladonna, lead vocals, Rob Caggiano on lead guitar, backing vocals, Frank Bello on bass and backing vocals, Scott Ian on rhythm guitar and backing vocals, and Charlie Benante on drums. The additional musicians credited on this album are Dan Nelson for the lyrics.
Indeed.
And Allison Chesley, who played the cello. And it's worth noting that this came out in 2011. They began recording it in 2009. And shit kind of went off the rails, and we don't know exactly what happened. Dan Nelson, who was the vocalist at the time, he had been the vocalist for 2 years in 2009, replacing Joey Belladonna after they fired his ass the second time, who had rejoined after John Bush left the band. Wrote the lyrics, started recording some of the stuff, and then something happened that we just don't know. To this day, they have not exactly said what happened. He says they fired him, that he didn't quit. They say he quit, that they didn't fire him. Who the fuck knows? All I know is that they got rid of him. John Bush came back in and fulfilled the dates that they had booked, and they thought about recording an album with him. John didn't want to commit to being in the band full time though, so they called Joey back. So Joey, for the third time, rejoins the band and is still in the band to this day. This is 3/5 of the classic lineup, missing Dan Spitz, who was the lead guitarist for Persistence of Time and that era of the band.
It's most of them.
It is.
This,
yeah.
You mean?
4/5. I said 3. I meant 4.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of
it's all but the lead guitarist. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it sounds very different. So.
Yep. And this is Rob Caggiano's last album as well, I believe, right?
It is. Yes, he leaves right after this.
To join Volbeat.
Yeah, I don't know what was up with that either. I didn't look into it. But anyway, this is the album. I selected this album because I'm a fairly big fan of Anthrax, and I just wanted us to touch on another one of their albums. Although, other than Slayer, I think we've done more of their albums than anybody else in the Big Four.
What have you done? Persistence, White Noise. What else?
We did Among the Living. And I thought we had done For All Kings, but I guess we hadn't. I guess
we had.
Just
so they're tied with Megadeth in at 4-piece.
Yeah.
Tracy would know the spreadsheet.
No, totally. Yeah.
So say it's the spreadsheet.
I love he might not know what year the album came out, but he knows how many we've done because he has the spreadsheet.
He doesn't need to know that shit. He has a spreadsheet.
I guess I can tell the story about this is because I'm just going to put this up front. This is my favorite Anthrax album. This is the one This is the first Anthrax album I ever listened to from start to finish. I'd heard Anthrax prior and heard a lot of their singles off their other albums, but I'd never sat down and listened to an album. And so around the time of its release, I heard the Devil You Know, one of the singles off the album. I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty badass. And I ended up acquiring a copy of it. And at this time, I was still in the military doing the reserves, and my reserve station was in Nashville, Tennessee, which I was living in Mayfield at the time. So a 2 to 2.5 hour drive. And so I'd put this in the CD player and just jam it the whole entire way down and the whole entire way back for about 3 months. And so this album this album has developed into like, I know every beat of this fucking album. Like it's developed into, like I mainlined this album for the better part of like 3 months.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
I had never heard it until this. Maybe once. Like I had downloaded it, obviously. I was like, oh, I had this before. I may have heard it one time and just never picked it up. And I love fucking Anthrax. Persistence of Time is the album that made me like metal. Like that was the entree for me. I went from that to then Megadeth and Slayer and Metallica. So I adore that album. And as Ben points out, that's most of these same people. And I was also on the ride very hard for White Noise. Sound of White Noise. That album is so good. And to me, one of the few, or let me rephrase, I'll be positive, one of the best cases where a band had to like replace a singer and sort of flip and come up with a new sound. And I think they did a very good job. But so this was so I have a long, and I loved Stomp 442. So I have a long history with Anthrax and was really into those sort of late 80s up to the mid 90s albums. But this one I just had never engaged with. So this was new for me, even though in some ways very familiar.
Yeah, I think this was the only Anthrax record I've ever listened to before. So I'm pretty new to them, and I didn't really know what to expect coming in. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by the end of it.
I have been on this train for as long as David has. That'll come as a shock to none of you, especially those of you who have listened to our previous Anthrax reviews. I had a buddy who was super, his name is also David, who was super into Anthrax, and we started listening to, like, we would binge Fistful of Metal, Among the Living, all of that stuff. Persistence of Time, I think, is the second best thrash album of all time, coming in right behind Rust in Peace. And, you know, a huge fan of the John Bush era. I will say that this album sounds a lot better than it has any right to, considering the controversy and the turmoil and that they were going through and trying to find somebody to just record vocals on this fucking thing. You know, and I think it helps that Belladonna didn't rewrite most of the stuff. Dan Nelson is credited on the majority of the tracks as the lyricist. So, you know, but it's not so far outside of the realm of what other Anthrax albums have been lyrically that it sounds out of place. And that is, in some ways, a miracle.
It is a miracle. It helps that Scott Ian will always be Scott Ian.
Yes,
he is the riffage in this, like every Anthrax album, is a solid foundation. And the drumming.
Yeah.
I mean, those two,
I was going to say,
they are eternal.
Yeah. And also, it's like that, also, Scott Ian is a known nerd. He's a known geek. And so I think part of, like, you know, the lyrical content, you know, you have the Judge Dredd lyrics or song in, is that Among the Living? I Am the Law. I believe it's in Among the Living. And then you've got, you know, Fight Until You Can't Hear, which is, I mean, Scott Ian's been in The Walking Dead like 5 times as a zombie. So, like, I think that's also bleeding into that there. And so, like, they're nerds wearing their nerdiness on their sleeve as well. And
Well,
I think
it's not just on their sleeve, it's on their album cover. I mean, this is Alex Ross did this album cover, and he's a world-renowned comic book cover artist. So
it's cool. It's a good one. It's creepy. Those of you on YouTube can see it. Those of you not on YouTube should look it up.
Yeah,
I didn't realize how creepy it was because I was looking at it on my phone, so it was basically a thumbnail.
So I guess the question, since this, and I'll direct this at Gabe, since we know that, Tracy, this is your favorite Anthrax album, because it's kind of where you got on. If this is the first time that you've listened to them all the way through, what did you think? I know you had asked us in our text thread what we thought about a band that had been around for this long and released this many albums, but I would like to hear more of your thoughts on this. Sure.
So the first time through this record, I was not... the first time through this record, I was like, okay, this is a thrash band that's been around for a pretty long time, but it doesn't sound like the purest thrash ever, which is fine. I mean, it's not their first record. But I was really surprised about how some of the tracks seem to have a grunge feel to them, like a really kind of alternative, like hard rock kind of grunge feel to it. That was my first impression, but I quickly sort of changed as I listened to it more. What really surprised me was how sing-along the choruses were. in on some of the tracks, like how not only were the riffs there, but there was plenty of moments where you felt like singing. And that's something that I hadn't experienced all that much with the thrash that I've listened to thus far.
I think it's very Belladonna. And I think Anthrax is also, I think one that turn came a bit with Sound of White Noise, which I think literally had some grunge elements. But the other thing is I feel like this New York sound, unlike I don't want to overstate this, but I feel like those California bands really went for precision and just excess in precision, both Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, that's all of them what they were doing. Whereas Anthrax always had this sort of silliness a tiny bit. There was a kind of a punk element, I think. So they've always had a little bit more of a, I don't think they take themselves as seriously as Megadeth, Slayer, or Metallica, and I think that really shows. And Joey Belladonna has always been, even on Persistence, which I think in some ways their most sort of, slightly proggy thrash record. You want to sing along with the guy. And then even on that album, there was that like there were some songs that were kind of almost upbeat. I mean, help me out here, Ben. But right, they've always been. I think they're different than the California bands.
Yeah, I think so too. They have always been more willing to let the tongue-in-cheekness come through, especially the entire way through their discography. And they were known as being. This is not uncommon for thrash, but they were known for being fast. It is interesting that the little bass thing that David did there is Got the Time, their cover of Joe Johnson, and Joe Johnson used to bust their balls saying that he played it faster live than they did, but it was faster than the recorded version. And so, it was just one of those things, man. And they've always had really catchy sing-along choruses. I think they got that. And I do think that is something that they took from punk or just being around that scene in New York and being exposed to all of that. But there is a very East Coast urban as opposed to West Coast urban thing in their music that you don't get from the other of the big four thrash bands. And Belladonna was not their first lead singer. His name escapes me.
I don't know either.
And then was it Ron McGovney or something? I don't know. That was the bassist.
Ron from Metallica.
Yeah. Anyway, he was not their first lead singer. They have transitioned from lead singer to lead singer pretty well, but it shows something about the tightness of the band, despite the fact that when Belladonna is solo, he often does write albums that are bitching about how he was treated in Anthrax, that these guys are good enough friends that they were able to tour with him and John Bush simultaneously, and they went back and forth. I'm sure there's tension between those two guys, but they seem to still be friends with everybody else in the band, not named Dan Spitz.
So Joey Belladonna is the fifth actual vocalist in the band.
That sounds right.
Because you have John Connolly that's in there for a drink of water, Jason Rosenfield for a short time, Neil Turbin's in there for Fistful of Metal.
Yes.
And then you have Matt Valiant, who doesn't make it longer than probably a couple months, and then Joey Belladonna comes in for that run from 84 to 92.
Was it Among the Living on?
It's Armed and Dangerous and on.
Even before. Yeah. On.
Through Cotton and Mosh, and then John jumps in at Sound of White Noise.
I mean, I want to point out these are the guys that sort of quasi, if not invented, definitely propelled rap metal into the universe.
Yeah.
Right? Like in terms of them willing to experiment. Again, that was a New York thing. That was them in Public Enemy. And I don't think Walk This Way counts. I know it's that adjacent. Sure, maybe it does. But
maybe Blondie. If I was
maybe Blondie. But anyway, in terms of the stuff, the Judgment Night and all that stuff that came after, that was Anthrax.
Yeah. So we can directly blame Anthrax for an album we hear and two albums that we do.
But the playing on this still holds up. I mean, these guys.
This one does, yeah.
Scott Ian is an amazing guitarist, and Charlie might be the best drummer out of all four bands. Honestly,
I think that's true.
I mean, the only one who's keeping close may be Lombardo, and if he's in the band or not, I mean that's
the problem. Lombardo just can't hack it. Like he throws a tantrum, leaves, comes back. I don't know, but this is not the time to talk about his lack of writing credits almost ever. But yeah. I think Charlie's amazing, and just sort of that rhythm section is one of the things that holds them together. Whatever other experimentations going on, whatever lyricists they have, that sort. And again, it's a little bit punky.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
The
Very
riffs are
irreverent.
there. I think whatever you might say about the rhythm section, the riffs are there in like the majority of the songs.
Yeah,
And you know, they have a feel for melody. Absolutely.
Mhm.
They can write many catchy melodies.
Yeah, and I think that's something they probably do better than their counterparts in the Big Four, as in the
Yes.
Big Four thrash, except for maybe the Black Album. There's parts in there where the Metallica, I think, kind of gets a melody better, bit better. But Anthrax, from Among the Living, every album they've released, they've been great at nailing the melody and like the harmonies between the guitars, and their guitar work, I think, has been phenomenal and at least the most consistent for all the bands as well.
I will have to say that I was really pleasantly surprised by how good Joey sounded on this album.
Me too.
It's partially from seeing them live a few times, and
Indeed.
it could be the venue, because the first time we heard them, they were outdoors. The second time, they were in an arena. It could be their sound person, but man, his voice just wasn't good then. It was actually lost a lot of times in the mix. But here, again, and it's the difference between studio and playing live, it sounds pretty good. He is singing within himself, so he's not trying to push his vocal into the range that he would have had in the 80s. And I think that that is an amazing amount of self-awareness that a lot of singers do not maintain in their careers when they can no longer hit the high notes. But he actually does a great job of singing within his voice, as I said here, and it sounds really, really good.
You know, this also was almost a decade before, certainly the last time I saw him with you.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he has some mileage on him.
Yeah. I think I saw them 3 times within 8 months of that year.
Mm.
And I think when I saw him the first time at, was it Marathon Music Works? It's just the first time I saw him with Kill Switch. I think that was his best vocal performance he did of the 3 times I saw them. And I think it was a little bit more compact than you. It wasn't the big arena like we did when we saw him with Slayer the second time. And it wasn't the amphitheater that really, I think everybody besides Lamb of God sounded like shit that night at that concert, even Slayer to an extent.
Yeah, no, I think only Lamb of God nailed it because of the brutality of their existence.
And Behemoth
And-
sounded good too.
And just the perfectionists that they are.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, to your point, I mean, they'd been on tour and his voice could have been deteriorating because of that. But I mean, the weakness in his voice was one of the reasons that they gave her Splitting Ways with him the first time. So, you know, and again, it speaks to the relationship that these guys have, despite saying that he would be invited back into the band 2 more times. But again, and sounding good in the studio and sounding good live are 2 completely different things. Look at GNR's first album. That sounds pretty good, but live they were a catastrophe from all the reviews that I've seen of their shows at the time. So 2 entirely different things, but and maybe it's being colored by, I know all the turnover and turmoil they were going through in trying to get this thing recorded, but I was impressed by how it sounded. Shall we talk about songs, or do we want to discuss this a little more?
I'm ready.
All right.
I think somebody should go before I do.
But we can probably do that. So I'll go first. I picked this thing after all. This is one of those things where none of the tracks really grab me and stand out a whole lot, but I also don't necessarily think there's a bad track on this album. The use of instrumentals, as you can see, we have 3 listed here: Worship, Hymn 1, and Hymn 2. They are good palate cleansers. They're spaced out pretty well. One of my favorite tracks on the album is Judas Priest. I think The Devil You Know is pretty good. Earth on Hell is okay. I think I probably would have liked it better if there wasn't the worship instrumental in front of it, despite the fact that I just praised the instrumentals. And we have this interesting thing here. Revolution Screams is not available on streaming, at least not on Spotify. It might be available.
It's on Amazon.
So we're starting to hit the albums that have different content depending on what platform you listen to them on. But overall, like I said, I think that the floor is very high, but the ceiling is kind of low. This is a pretty cool album to listen to, but not a lot of the tracks really stood out to me.
I guess I'll jump in. I was a big fan of Earth on Hell. I think should have been the opener. And Devil You Know is also a really great riff. It's groovy, it has a sing-along chorus. Fight 'Em Till You Can't was also really nice. Even though at that point I was saying to myself the first time through, this record sounds a lot more hard rock than it does metal. And I'm Live is also really good. I love the solos. Has that sing-along quality to it. In the end, I think is where the album really, really opens up. It reaches for epic and it actually gets there, even though the intro might be a little bit long for my taste. And I think the last two standouts on the album are Crawl, which really reminds me a lot of 90s alt rock, maybe like Toadies or Soundgarden or something. Even Belladonna sounds like Chris Cornell a little bit on there. But the chords are just amazing. The verse melody is really cool. And then the constant is just one groovy riff on top of the next. I really dig that.
I agree that it should have started with Earth on Hell. I find that first instrumental totally pointless. From there, I this will not shock anyone. I feel a lot like Ben. I'm not trying to get these stand out a ton, but there's no bad songs on here. The instrumentals that are, him 1, him 2, they're fine. They sort of space things out. I do like that run, Devil You Know, Find 'Em If You Can, I'm Alive. But I agree with Gabe. I think it picks up a lot. I think in the end, the Giant, Judas Priest, Crawl, and the Contestant are awesome. I think this album picks up at the middle and sort of peaks towards the end. I kind of wish the album had ended with the Contestant, but I guess that is where it ended for Ben. It sounds like a closer to me.
Yeah,
it really
definitely
does.
so.
And every time Revolution screams or something, I'm like, wait, there's another one. So it's a weird fit. I don't know, and I don't know the history of that. I assume that was always on there. I think it was because the copy I had from a long time ago, it was on there.
Yeah, I'm sure it was still on the physical copy. And we can ask Tracy since he mainlined it for.
He would know better than any of us. I know. This is your moment, Tracy. I guess
Let me pull up my.
I was just going to say though that Hidden Tracks is so late '90s.
Yes.
Let me pull
Secret
up my
songs are mid 90s.
Yeah. On my computer.
But it's 2011. I feel like it's late for this much track shenanigans.
It's too late for this.
That was entirely my point.
It's way too late for this shit. I know. Like, are you serious right now? Was this album 2001? Like, what?
Yeah. My copy had it, but honestly, weirdly enough, because I have Spotify, and so I was using Spotify, listening to it, and I always felt like I was like, something's missing on this. Like I didn't quite put my finger on. I didn't look up the track list or nothing. Like, well, I guess I felt like something was missing, and then you brought that up, and I was like, shit, there is another track on this album that I ended up listening to, never hearing it, like this run through that we did for this album. So,
yeah, Amazon and Apple both had it.
Guess they were willing to pay the licensing fee.
I guess they were.
Yes, so Spotify's some cheap bastards. Got to pay Joe Rogan some more $100 million.
Shit.
But besides that, I enjoy. Obviously, I don't have an issue with Worship as the intro on there. I'm fine with instrumentals as the intro. But I think I enjoy every track on here. I even think him 1 and 2 are great on it. Kind of interludes, like you have the. I don't know what they're called, but it's the hanging steel pipes that are accordingly. I don't remember what they are, but you use a hammer to hit them. I don't know what the instrument's called, but you see it a lot of time like orchestras and ensembles and stuff. But I like that addition in there and what they do. But I enjoy every track off this album. Oddly enough, I think my least favorite is Fight 'Em Till You Can't. But I think if I had to pick a favorite, I would say probably the back half of the Indie and the Giant, Judas Priest, Crawl, and the Constant.
Contestant.
It's the Constant.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I was just reading off the screen. Shows what I fucking know. How dare I? No, that's. I mean, Tracy listened to it every day for 100 years.
Yeah, no, I'll trust it.
The Constant.
Let's check. And make sure
I just believe you.
Spotify
Tracy
doesn't have it wrong.
I didn't get it off Spotify, I don't think. So it's entirely possible that I may put too many letters in there and change the word.
Just the constant.
So what
constant
instrument
out
are
of
you
constant
describing,
overall.
Tracy? You said it's
Oh,
your
The tubular
banging.
bells.
Yeah, exactly.
Glockenspiel. No, I'm gonna stop.
Glockenspiel, yeah.
Look at
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that means it's time to.
Here we
grade
go.
these.
I'm gonna. Here we go. I think I found them.
Oh, Tracy's got a.
It is actually the tubular bells. I mean, that's the actual.
Yeah, I figured that's what it was. So
I didn't know what they were called.
Amazing.
tubular bells. Yeah, for
Again, we
excitement-
talked about it beforehand. I played football. Wasn't.
I
in
thought you were
band.
just I thought you were describing like a Slipknot setup. Like you're like, there's a hammer and there's some metal. I'm like, wait, what?
Come on, David. You were in marching band.
We did not have tubular fucking bells.
Yes, you did. Don't lie.
I'm pretty sure we did not have that. I don't know. We were too new a school, I guess, to be that cool.
Indeed. Well, I picked this thing, so I'm going to go first. I think that this is a solid album. I'm going to give it a B-. I think it was better than it had any right to be. Again, considering all the whatnot around it, it was good to hear Joey back with Belladonna or with the rest of Anthrax, even if I do still prefer John Bush than the John Bush era. But man, a solid album. No complaints about it at all.
To everybody's lack of surprise, I fucking love this album, and I am giving it a. I'm gonna go ahead and give it an A+. I'm gonna give it right there at a 98.
Unto the gods. Okay.
Mhm.
Right on.
It's my favorite Anthrax album, and
get it, dude.
ranked. And I went back and looked. I gave Sound of White Noise and Among the Living A piece. So
I'll jump in because I'm the noob of the hour. So this album definitely grew on me. The issue, though, is that for the tracks that I wasn't so excited about, they take up about half an hour, and the record is like a little bit over an hour long, which is not very satisfactory to me. So whereas I think under different circumstances, given that this is the only Anthrax record that I've really spent a lot of time with, under normal circumstances, I would really just give it an A-. But I'm gonna have to knock it down to a B because Revolution Screams is just like not really a song. It's just like two non-songs to me. But the Judas Priest one doesn't really do anything for me, and neither do the instrumentals. But everything else is pretty great. So it's tough, but I think they would understand.
Jaden. I'm going to come in pretty similar to, well, not to Tracy. I don't have the experience Tracy does, but that's okay. And I really like Anthrax a lot. I'm going to give this album a B+, so like an 87.5. Because, yeah, the last track pisses me off. And the first instrumental, meh. I'm glad Joey Belladonna did not try and write his own lyrics or try and engineer anything, but I don't know. I feel like it's lacking a little bit of what it might have had if it had been him from start to finish. But again, an 87+ is way better than it deserves to be given the conditions in which it was created. That is a testament to, I think, Scotty and just, the friendship all these people have with each other. So yeah, it's a high B/low B+.
All right. Well, Tracy, what are we doing next time?
next, we are doing David's pick, and he chose an album from this year in Cerebral Rot's Excretion of Mortality.
We read the website and it was too ludicrous to not.
It was super ludicrous.
It was so
Such a
ludicrous.
great way.
They absolutely know who they are, what they are, and what they're about. It was one of the most like Deadpool self-awareness level death metal things I'd ever seen. And then we listened to it, the three of us, I guess it was. I don't think Gabe was there then. And we're like, okay. Like it was, it was kind of awesome. So yeah, I threw.
You were like, are they, oh God, I forgot how you phrase it. It's like, are they in on the joke or do they take it super serious?
They're in
and
on
then
the
you're
joke.
like, and then you're like, they're in on the joke.
They're so in on the joke. So I'm excited about that. And I appreciate you all tolerating my ambassadorial position given to me by death metal, my diplomatic legate. letters of patent.
in just that fucking album cover.
Oh, it's a lot. Yeah, I did
Yeah,
not
it is super.
widely disseminate that, but we're gonna see all that on YouTube together soon enough.
Together. Like Belladonna back in the fold with the rest of the boys.
Back in the
Exactly.
band for the 7th time.
For
This
the
time it's
7th
gonna
time.
work.
That's right. I
It's worked so far. It's going on 10
yeah,
years.
For 10 years. That might be longer than his original stint in the band. I know Tracy said the numbers earlier, but I wasn't paying that much attention. So
I think it is. Because I think it is the longest. Because he was 84 to 91,
90.
I believe.
90 or 91, because I don't know that they immediately replaced him and went into the studio. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm glad to see they're back. I'm glad I got to see them live. I still hold out hope that someday maybe John Bush will join them for some tours, even if he doesn't join them for another album, and I'll get to go see those. But either way, thank you, Gabe, for joining us again. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening to us here on Thunderdome Metal Reviews.